Welcome to Standing Up. Good evening, afternoon, morning. I don't know where in the world you are, but hello. I just had a great conversation with Ashriel Ben Israel, a friend of mine. He is a member of the Hebrew Israelite community. He is the liaison between the Hebrew Israelite community and the IDF. And he also works with the Israel's Ethiopian community to combat racism. As you know, racism is deep, it's complex, and like on most of my episodes, we just barely scratch the surface. As you'll see, we agree on a lot, but we also disagree on quite a lot. We did not get to work out all our differences quite yet. We will in future episodes. Ashriel has a very interesting perspective, a very inspiring perspective. A lot of what he talks about is about the self-empowerment of Black communities around the world, and he explains how that's been effective for the Hebrew Israelite community. We had a lot of conversations about the difference between an overt, intentional, supremacist form of racism, the type that you could consider the Klan or Nazis, and compared that to an internal, a more internalized racism, which I prefer to use a different term, and we get into this. This we did not agree on, and we did not reach a conclusion on. But it's a very interesting conversation, one that I'd like to have more, and I'd love to actually hear your opinions on it. So enjoy the episode, and as always, let me know what you think. All opinions are welcome, but as always, keep it respectful, because that's what we're here to do. We're not here to bash each other. We're here to have good conversations. Enjoy. Ashriel, my brother, welcome.
Thank you. How are you, my brother?
I'm doing good. I guess for a little background for the audience, you and I have been friends for a few years already. I think we go back 5 years.
I think longer than 5 years, no?
Yeah, maybe.
I think I was about 21 or so. So we got a good 8 years or so.
That always excites me that I have the opportunity to interview friends, especially friends who I didn't meet through activism. So you and I met through the nightlife scene of Tel Aviv, and we both ended up doing something related to activism. So that's always very cool to see. Before we get started, I may be mistaken, but do you have a sweatshirt similar to what I'm wearing now?
I think I do.
Okay.
I'll have a look later on. And see, because I remember that was a sweatshirt that I wore quite often.
Yep. Well,
and you have it on today, bro.
So listen,
great job.
I haven't worn this sweater in a few years now. Before every episode, I'm always thinking, what should I wear? What should I put on? And I saw this. I'm like, Ashriel has the same one. I'm going to wear it for this episode. So I remember when you rolled up to the club with it, I'm like, damn, I can't be wearing that, the same that Ashriel wears it. And he wears it better than me. So, I'll never.
Good looking out, but you're doing good yourself, though. I mean, you're looking pretty snazzy there yourself, bro.
Thank you.
You deserve the compliments,
Thank you. So, anyways, let's get into this. Let's take a deep dive into activism, into the amazing work you're doing. You are the official. Correct me if I'm getting the title wrong, but you are the official communicator between the IDF and the Hebrew Israelite community. Is that correct?
Yeah. For since 2012, it was actually something, well, probably a bit beforehand, 2011, I would say. The leader of the Hebrew Israelite community, my spiritual father, Ben Ami Ben Israel, may his soul be at rest, he appointed myself and another person to be the official liaisons between the military and the community. And the purpose of it was that because we were right inside of the system, and we had a better understanding of the operation of the system. And he mandated us to help to lead and to direct many of the children, the youth who were being inducted into the military, so that they could have some kind of idea of what it is that they're going into, to give them, that proper help and assistance along their way. Because a lot of times going into the military as a 17 or 18-year-old kid just coming out of high school, and then they put a gun in your hand and you take that kind of responsibility on your back now, that's a heavy load to carry. And especially coming from a community where we were considerably, kind of a close-knit community where we didn't have so many options to just be isolated, just us and the wider society. So we had to really take on another responsibility of bringing with us a lot of our principles and walking them through our military service where we don't know anybody. We almost don't have nothing in common with nobody who we're around. And we had to just find a way to kind of just fit into, to the mosaic of the military as such. So since 2011, we've been working hard to actually make sure that they know where they're going, to give them better direction, going into the military, and then to assist them throughout their path in the military, and then afterwards to help them to readjust to the regular civil life, where we notice a lot of 21-year-old, 20-year-old children, once they finish the military, they kind of lost.
Mm-hmm.
They have no idea what they want to do now, where they want to go from now. It's just like 2 to 3 year span of time where afterwards you just try to figure your life out from scratch. And it's been a heavy load. It's been a heavy load, but it's been rewarding, I'd say, as well. Very rewarding.
Amazing. I guess just to give the audience a little bit of background, who is the Hebrew Israelite community? Where do they come from? What is their story?
Well, the Hebrew Israelite community is a community that originated here in Israel. Because if you remember, during the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD, when the Romans came to destroy the temple, we had in Israel 12 tribes, who many of the tribes kind of dispersed to different areas. They have some who they say dispersed to North Africa, Yemen, and Morocco, and all of those areas. Well, Yemen is more so in the Arabian Peninsula, but North Africa. Then you had those who they say dispersed to the European countries, and then you had those also who dispersed back to Ethiopia. But then you also have those who dispersed to West Africa, and in West Africa, because we were the newcomers to West Africa, and they noticed that we kind of, didn't fit into the West African culture. And then in 1492, beginning with the first slave trades, the transatlantic slave trades, we were the first ones who were actually sold into slavery by the local West Africans. And we were taken to America as slaves, and thus that begins the process of Hebrew Israelites being in America, Black people of Hebrew Israelite descent being in America, because history took us there. But now we connect that both to biblical history in terms of us understanding that in the Bible, it does give a very clear indication to Abraham that he should know for surety that his seed will be a stranger in the land that is not his, and he will be afflicted for 400 years, and then afterwards he'll come out and be taken back to the land of his forefathers. And then it says also in the book of Deuteronomy in the Bible that the exact way where we'll be taken back as slaves, and that'll be through ships. So we know that the only slavery that happened on ships, and the only slavery that lasted for 400 years in the modern era as we know it, was the slavery of the Blacks in America, that only ended with the Emancipation Proclamation. But then we know that it also continued to spill over into 1963, where only then did we start getting some kind of human rights and civil rights in America, with the civil rights movement of Dr. Martin Luther King and all of the other ones who were leading the civil rights movements in America. And then in 1966, the leader of the Hebrew Israelite community, His Excellency Ben Ami Ben Israel, may his soul be at rest, he had a vision. And in the vision, the angel Gabriel came to him and notified him that it was time for us to get back to the land of our fathers. Now, this was during, very worrisome times in America. I mean, the riots in the West and Watts, and Dr. Martin Luther King had just gotten killed. No, he got killed in '68. But Malcolm X movement, the Black Panthers. I mean, there was a reawakening to the understanding that America is possibly not the place that we should be. And so they went back biblically just to understand, how did we get to America? And then that led him to understanding that America was the place of our captivity. And in 1967, the first group of Hebrew Israelites left America in a large exodus of 400 people, the largest exodus out of America of Black people since, and went through Liberia and remained in Liberia for about 2.5 years. If you remember, Liberia was the country that accepted all Black people coming out of America. It was set up to be a country to receive Black Americans who, after slavery, were looking to come back and to reconnect to their African roots. And so in 1969 was the arrival of the first Hebrew Israelites back to our lineage, back to our cultural land, which is Israel. And then since then, we've been here. So we're talking about now 50 plus years of, being back in the land and being back strong.
Beautiful story. Would you say that the move here, because it seems like in a sense you guys were, one of the reasons to leave America was to escape racism. But in all fairness, I don't think Israel is less racist than America. It's probably on a similar scale, if not more. Sure, they don't have the same legacy of racism because it's a fairly new country. Israelis never owned Black slaves. We never had segregation. But as you and I both know, there still is a fair amount of racism amongst Israeli society. But then on the other hand, it seems like, and I've visited you guys in Dimona. Remember, I came a few years ago for a New World Passover.
I remember.
I had a great time.
I remember.
You guys are thriving.
Right.
So I'm really trying to understand what the key here is, because you guys didn't escape racism, but you guys are thriving. And maybe you'll tell me you're not thriving the way I see it. Maybe you'll say the racism isn't as bad as I see it, but I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, we didn't leave America to escape racism, because racism is still happening today in Israel, in America, a lot of other countries in the world. And the idea of white supremacy is an idea that is really running rampant in the world today. I mean, when you look anywhere in the world at any country of African descent, both in Africa and outside of Africa, you see that the majority of the countries are modeling themselves after the European and American countries. And then you see that the Europeans and America have also colonialized almost every Black country in the world and fed them the seeds of American supremacism, which is saying in very simple terms that we as Black people are not on the level of any whites in the society. And so they have to come and to teach us what society is and to help us to somehow find our way. Because you hear the stories of before the white people came into Africa, the Europeans came into Africa, they found that we were on hanging off trees and bones in our noses and barbaric, but those stories are not true, because when we actually think about royalty, real royalty, then you go and you look at the royal families of Ethiopia, and you look at the royalty in Mali and Timbuktu, and you look at the royalty in Egypt, and you look at the royalty in other parts of Africa, on the west coast of Africa, Ghana. And I mean, so it can't be that Europeans introduced anything of civil nature to Black people, but it just shows that that there's this ideal in European and Americans' minds, white Americans and white Europeans' minds, that they're better in some way. Just give me a moment here. No, people are calling in. But they have an idea that they're better than we are. So we didn't come here expecting that Israel will be any different in terms of the white superior idea, but we came back here to reconnect to our Hebraic roots, to our Hebraic land, and to recreate ourselves after 2,000 years of exile and 400 years of slavery that really broke us down to a point where we had no idea what our culture was. We adopted the language of our slave masters, which is English, which is not our mother language. We adopted the cultural tenets of Europeans. We adopted the dress of the Europeans. Hell, we didn't even have the ability to maintain our cultural tenets in terms of who we are from the Bible, because all they showed us was that they say that Jesus was a white person, and every character that we know from the Bible that had any kind of relevance was a white person. So all we knew was that everybody great in history, especially dealing with God, was white. So we had to unlearn a lot of those behaviors that we learned for 400 years of being in that kind of captivity, both mental captivity as well as chattel slavery. But the mental portion was the worst portion, because after we were released from the shackles and the chains, that mental portion spilled over into years and years and years. But let me see if I can continue to record this, because I think the recording stopped. Okay, so the mental portion it just spilled over, and now we still see how it is today. So we came to reestablish ourselves as a new people, reconnecting to our old selves, unlearning everything that we had learned for 400 years, and finding ourselves in a true ideal. And then when we understood that we're Hebrew Israelites and we come from lineages of kings and queens and great people throughout history that history marvels from, then it gave us, a new sense of royalty and of pride. And so being in Israel now for these 50 years, it hasn't been easy. So when you say prospering, look, in terms of us creating for ourselves, yes, we're prospering. In terms of us now establishing a culture for ourselves once again, yes, we're prospering. In terms of us being able to create a community where we don't experience so many of the dreadful things that are experienced out in the world, especially dealing with Black people back in America, drive-by shootings and rapes and killings and so many other things that we can go into. We haven't experienced that. I grew up with a great childhood. I wasn't afraid to walk around. We sleep with our doors open. I can walk into any of my neighbor's home and just go into the refrigerator and just get something to eat for myself. We call each other brother, ach, sister, achot. We refer to the elders as ima and abba, not literal parents, but just in the cultural aspect that we now created a community where we're all our brother's keeper. We're all our sister's keeper. We're all one big family. And so in that sense, we're prospering, but we've been dealing with both political, economic challenges for 50 plus years. And simply the reason why is because the color of our skin doesn't allow the Israeli society to receive us as part of the general house of Israel. Because they say that anybody who don't come from very specific places, they even given the Ethiopians a hard time when they know that the Ethiopians maintained for 2,000 years. They're the only people who maintain this culture for 2,000 years, and Ethiopia is the only country that has never been colonialized. For a short period by the Italians, but they got kicked out. But they've been giving the Ethiopians a hard time, so how much more us? And we've been experiencing these challenges simply because there's a very clear definition, according to the halakha and the rabbinate, as to who is Jewish and who's not Jewish. Well, we don't claim to be Jewish. We claim to be Hebrew Israelites, coming from the lineage of Abraham and coming from the cultural connection of the tribe of Judah. So from there, we're Jews. But when you refer to everybody in the house of Israel as Jews, well, you have 12 tribes in the house of Israel. Everybody is not from the tribe of Judah, so everybody can be Jewish. And when we refer to everybody as Jewish coming from the house of Israel, that's a flaw. That's very fundamentally flawed. So that's caused us for 50 plus years some serious challenges with the Israeli society, especially with the Israeli rabbinate and with the politicians who wouldn't even allow us to be recognized in Israel after 50 years. 50 years been in Israel, they still won't recognize our community as even citizens of Israel. I mean, how much more do we need to do to be considered as a regular citizen of Israel? We do the military. We've brought in some of the most influential people in the world, including Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown, including Winnie Mandela from South Africa, including the Neville brothers, and so many more. I mean, we can go down the line. We've established connections and communities in Africa that allowed Israel to get into Africa where they didn't have that ability to do so beforehand. But still, we have to deal with this.
Right. So you said a lot. I want to try to break it down and touch on a few different points here. As we established, you guys returned to Israel because you sensed it was your purpose, not to escape racism. You arrived to Israel, and there's still racism, there's still discrimination, but yet in certain aspects, as we agreed, you guys are thriving. So would you say it's fair to say the reason why your community has been able to thrive while other Black communities haven't found the same success is because that sense of identity you guys have found, and that you guys have really, you guys have this sense of meaning, you have this history and this identity that really connects you? Do you think that's part of what has helped you guys?
That's definitely part of it. But I would say in a broader sense, because of our purpose of coming to Israel, and because of us knowing who we are again as far as our identity, that's given us the kind of motivation that we need internally to be able to establish for ourselves and not go for handouts from anybody.
Right.
See, a lot of the things that we had to establish for ourselves, for example, we have our own school in Dimona. The reason why we had to establish our own school was because the other schools in Dimona wouldn't accept us. And so we had to do for ourselves. We have what is called the House of Life in Dimona, which is, it's not a hospital, but it is sort of like a health care center that approximately 2,000 children were born there with natural birth. And the reason why was because we didn't have health care and we weren't accepted into the Israeli facilities. So we had to do for self. We have a community store in Dimona. The reason why we had to establish our own store was because for years and years, every time we wanted to go to some other store outside of the community, we were picked up and deported and brutally dealt with. So we had to establish an internal mechanism for ourselves to allow us to self-sustain, because being dependent on others, we understood that we've been dependent on others for practically 400 years now,
right.
And that didn't take us that didn't take us too far. So I would say the main part is us understanding, like, if we're going to make something happen, we have to make it happen. It's not coming from nowhere else, and it's definitely not going to fall out the sky. We can pray about it, but then we have to get up and do the work. And that's what we've been doing for 50 years. We've been doing the work.
So I actually think we're getting to something very important, because there's an interesting duality to how the right wing and the left wing, and I know these are just, it's an overly simplistic way to view groups of people as right or left, but there's a certain narrative that you see more common coming out of the left and more common coming out of the right. And I guess this is true also in Israel and definitely true in America. On the right, they'll say, Black people are equal under the law. The reason that they're not equal, the reason that they're not doing well, that's just their own bad decisions. They're just not doing the right things they have to do. And then the left is saying, well, it's the system. They were enslaved. They're oppressed. How can they be doing well? Now, and it's interesting because you could kind of find a certain sense of truth to both of these. I do view it as inherently wrong to tell Black people and say, especially as a white man, right? But if I were to tell a Black person, say, look, you are in control of your destiny. You just need to make the right decisions, and you'll be doing as well as whites. That's obviously a wrong statement. It's an inappropriate statement. There's so much about the system that affects people's outcome. But at the same time, and this is inherently controversial to say, especially from a white person, but at the same time, we need to acknowledge that there's a lot that can happen from within a community to help elevate that community. And it seems like the best approach to any change is one from the ground up, from individuals taking responsibility. And those individuals are not only Black individuals, they're also white individuals like myself. It's us working together. But then there's also the systemic change that we need to create in order to bring change. So I think you and I being able to sit and have this conversation and really talk about both the bottom-up approach and the top-down approach, I think that's beautiful. And I think that's really what's missing from conversations, because you'll just hear the right saying, oh yeah, you just need to do more, and the left saying, it's all the system, it's all the system, it's all the system. But we need to connect both these sides, and we need individuals to empower themselves, and then we need to also change the system to create a level playing field for all people. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I would say that the reason why I haven't dealt in the conversation thus far in politics was because I personally don't believe that politics is the key to our success and our rise as a people, because it was politics that put into law that in the U.S. Constitution that Black people are 3/5 of a person, right? It was politics that brought together the Berlin Conference to divide Africa. I mean, literally taking a pen and, just kind of, okay, well, this will be this portion. We'll take this. We're going to name this country this. We're going to take this portion. And whether it's the left or the right, the system is the problem. Because even when you look in America today, majority of Black people have been inherently voting for the liberals. Why? What have they done for us? Nothing. Then you have those who are voting for the conservatives. Why? What have they done for us? Nothing. On both ends of the stick, yeah, we're going to get a little portion of this from there, a little portion of that from there. But at the end of the day, everybody who's actually thriving is communities who have taken their own destiny into their own hands to establish for themselves. And so when you look at the Korean people, wherever they go in the world, they're establishing centers wherein Koreans are running those centers and businesses and whatever it may be. You have a Chinatown in practically every country in the world, right? Wherever you go in the world, you could be able to find it. You have the Indians and they have their own portion. You have the Arabs and they have their own portion. And then you have the Europeans where they have their own developed portion. But the only people who are always missing out everywhere you go are the Black people. And they're primarily in the ghettos, in the slums, and they're the ones who are deprived from jobs. They're the ones who are offered the worst jobs, and they offer those jobs last. I mean, the system itself is built, is predicated, again, on white supremacy. So whether you're coming from the left or you're coming from the right, in my opinion, it doesn't make any difference. I believe wholeheartedly that our redemption is going to come from us being able to reassess our situation for the last few decades, to sit down to understand what is good for Black people in Africa, what is good for Africans. Take the European models out of there. They don't fit, because I don't see any Europeans taking African models and implementing them into their political systems. So we have to take the European systems out of Africa, first and foremost, and then start to establish African systems. We as Black people have to reassess what is good for us. For too long have we been dependent on the left wing to do something for us, and then if the left wing don't do it, then we say, okay, we're going to take all of our votes, we're going to go to the right wing, and the right wing don't do it, and we go back to the left wing. But at the end of the day, they're just playing ping pong between themselves, because they're just two sides of the same coin, and at the end of the day, we don't fit on either side. So however you flip it, we're in a loss. So politics is not, nothing is going to come from politics. Nothing is going to come from economics, really, because they're the ones who print the money. They're the ones who are in control of the money. They're the ones who are in control of the systems. The world systems are predicated on Europe and America. So, I mean, we have to establish something that will benefit us and then cause everybody else to respect that. If we don't do that, we don't have a chance. I'm just being honest with you. We just don't have a chance.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm not sure I fully agree that there's no benefit into trying to get into politics, because what we've seen throughout the years, we're seeing more and more representation of minority groups in politics. And it's true you said that the system is right. There's some inherent racism to how the system was built. And definitely, if you look at the past, I mean, look at America, you literally, the start of America, is built by slaves, by Black slaves, primarily. There were Native American slaves, there were Irish slaves, but primarily Black slaves. Until the 60s, they weren't equal under the law. It seems like what is holding a lot of Black people back today from a societal perspective, right? It's not that, and again, I may be wrong, but I don't see it as the inherent racism of how the system was built. I see it as really a subconscious bias towards different groups. I think we all have it. So we all have like our bias of groups. Most Israelis have some fear of Arabs. They think something about Yemenites. Arabs and Yemenites think something about Ashkenazi Jews. So we all have that subconscious bias. Now, that bias is made worse when there's a legacy of racism. So when Blacks have been depicted as lazy and unintelligent, as they've been depicted for centuries now, that just strengthens our subconscious bias. So you can have like an employer, a white employer, he's interviewing two people. This employer is not racist in the overt sense. He has nothing against Black people, but he seems to favor the white person. It's something within him. He seems to favor the white person.
But you have to ask why, though.
Well, again, it seems we have natural group biases, but I think it's backed up by what we see in TV, what we hear from our politicians, what we've learned in our school. So I personally think we should differentiate between overt racism, the idea that one race is better than the other. I think that is a category of racism that's much easier to define, and that it's so obviously detestable and we should condemn it. And then there's that internal bias, and I know many people like to call it racism. I just think when you use racism for something so common, because I have not met a single person who doesn't have some internal bias, right? Some subconscious bias towards one group or another. You need to be truly, truly evolved. And, we should strive to get to this point, but you need to be truly evolved to get to the point where you don't have these biases. So the challenge is when there's one group of people that have the majority of control, right? The majority of the positions of power in Israel and in America are by white people, primarily white men. So because we naturally favor our own, it just puts whites at an advantage and blacks and other minority groups at a disadvantage. But to call this racism, I think it's not. When you say racism, someone thinks, they think there's something malicious, something intentional about it. This is something that we're not even aware of. So I think that it's a conversation that needs to be had. And I think, and again, I'm not saying you're wrong by having that self-empowered approach. That might be the best way to have, an empowered Black community. And through having an empowered Black community, they're then able to, communicate and educate white people, a different side to Blacks than what we see on TV or what we were perhaps taught. Maybe that's their approach, but I think there is something to be said about what creates this systemic group difference that we see. There's no law that puts a Black person at a disadvantage, as far as I know, but there's a lot in society. There's a lot written into our culture that does that. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you're making excuses. I think you're making excuses for very clear racism. When we speak of racism, we're simply speaking about putting one race over the other, favoring one race over the other, for whatever reasons there may be, for pre-thoughts or conditions that we've heard about from politicians and certain situations that we may have individually encountered with people of other races, and then we develop that within ourselves. But look, the society itself is built on the understanding that whites are better and Blacks are less. Why? And then you go down the historical analysis, annals, and you look and see how have we been depicted for centuries now. What is taught about Black people in schools? What is taught about white people in schools, right? Who are the heroes throughout history? You never hear Black people being heroes. When we look at the clear understanding of color, right? Everything that is Black is considered bad, is considered terrible, is considered dark, but everything that is considered, everything that's white is considered pure, and good and holy. Yeah. So these are things that are being consistently focused into and pushed into the mental aspect of people and into the society to cause the society that as soon as they look at a white person, as soon as they look at a Black person, they automatically, like you say, not intentional, but it's an automatic thought in white people's heads that they're automatically better than Black people. Why? Because Black people come from a history of slavery and a history of being downtrodden, and all the countries in Africa have been colonialized. So I think you're making excuses for it.
Well, so I actually don't disagree with what you said. I agree that is what is happening, that there's something internal within us that, and again, this is from the culture we come from, right? We view we view groups differently. I guess the reason I think it's important to put it in a different category than people who are malicious and intentional with their racism is because the remedy seems to be different. So if we want people to be less, well, actually the remedy to both is education, but if we're going to now condemn every single person who has a subconscious bias, then I don't know a single individual that would not be condemned. You get what you see what I'm getting at? So
no, I get what you're saying.
How can we have the conversation with white people? And again, this is what the podcast is all about, how to have better conversations. How can we explain to more white people that there is something inherently, I don't even like to use the word inherently racism, because I think it dilutes the intentional form of racism, but something inherently biased about how we view groups. And this puts Black people at a disadvantage. We have let's call it an internalized, unintentional racism that exists inside most white people. I'm okay with that. But The problem is the second we categorize somebody as racist, so let's say we need to have this conversation with people, we need to convince them that there's this internal thing. We say, look, you're racist. And they'll be like, I'm not racist. I love all people. So we're not successful in then speaking to them. So that's why I'm trying to define it in gentler terms. And I think when we are able, if we could define it in gentler terms, it might be more palatable for white people. They don't want to hear they're racist because they don't feel like they're racist. But if you tell them they have a bias and that bias puts blacks at a disadvantage, I have a feeling they'd be way more accepting to hearing that.
Yeah, but then at that point, I mean, there's no reason, in my opinion, there's no reason to try and soften it up. Because at the moment where we start to kind of minimize the importance of, or even try to smooth it out with better words and easier definitions and all of that, then we take away from the problem at hand. Because the problem is very simple and it's very direct: racism. Now, however you want to call it, however you want to change the wording of it, that's a different story. But it's still, at the end of the day, at the root, it's racism. So with us trying to have conversation, when we can sit down, we can discuss, me and you, I mean, you're a white person, I'm a black person, but I love you as a brother of mine, right? And I know that you love me as a brother of yours as well. Of
course.
So in terms of your opinion of me, you wouldn't look at me and say, okay, he's a black person, so he's any less of a person than I am, or he should be given less opportunities than I'm given because he's black and I'm white. And I was born into a society where they favor white over black. Mm-hmm. No, you will look at it and you will say, look, he's a human being. Let's look at his character. Let's take all of his credentials, and based on that, we could measure his qualification or not. But his qualification should have nothing in the world to do with the color of his skin, because in most cases we miss it by a moment, because we think just because somebody is white, they may be better at something than a black person is. But then a lot of times it's really not that way. But we don't have a chance to be able to show our capabilities because we're not provided the same opportunities that others are provided in this world. So now at the end of the day, what the conversation, in my opinion, would have to be, okay, what is the source of this racist bias? What is the reason for us continuing to push it in education, in history, in politics, and economics? And then go from that point, how do we change that? Because the same way it was learned, this is a learned behavior. This is nothing that just fell out of the sky. It was a learned behavior. It was an educated behavior. It was moved down from generations. We can go right back and to sit down at the table and to change the definition of things, to re-educate in a correct way. But I don't believe that the people who are running the world institutions are interested in changing the dynamics of things, because it puts them at a disadvantage if now they have to scoot over now and allow somebody who is just as good as they are to get into that space, because then they feel like it's kind of a threat to their position in the world, to their world hegemony. So they're not really looking to provide those kind of opportunities. I understand it, because no one wants to lose, the kind of power that they have over this world. But at the end of the day, it's something that's going to happen ultimately. So whether we do it now or whether it happens later on in other ways, it's going to happen. So we may as well do it in an easier way, and I would say probably in a peaceful way, because most revolutions in world history were not peaceful. Mm-hmm. And it's just a moment in time where you get to the point where you're so oppressed to the point where you say, okay, I'm going to do all that I can to regain my dignity, to rise above my current situation. And it may not be in conventional ways, but if we remember, then that's how every other revolution was in the world. So I don't think the Black Revolution will be any different.
So It's clear we want the same end goal. I think that we have a little disagreement in the best approach, but I also acknowledge my ignorance and that it's possible that what I think to be the best approach, I may be wrong, and I may be convinced eventually that there's a better approach. I do think that there has been tremendous progress been made with Blacks around the world. Would you agree with that?
Progress in what sense, though?
Well, if we look at like positions of power, Black people in positions of power, there's been an increase from year to year. I don't really know much of the data for Israel, but I know, there's more and more Black executives in American companies than there's ever been. There's more Black politicians than there's ever been. So I'm personally not convinced that there needs to be, I think a peaceful revolution that is really based off education and communication is really the best way, because I see that we've made tremendous strides. Some of it's been violent, other parts of it have been peaceful, but it seems like this final stretch, and again, I may be wrong, but this final stretch, I think, can be had through just better communication, better education, and good conversations like we're having now. Are you not that optimistic?
Well, look, if I saw that the route was changing over the years, then I probably will be optimistic. But when I see that every year we have more and more Black people being shot down and killed by police, when I see that every year the jails are being filled with more Black people, when I see that every year the economic disposition of Black people is continuing to increase as a whole, but is decreasing per individual. What do I mean by that? The Black community in America handles approximately $1 trillion a year. What is happening with those funds? Where are they going to? You talk about Black executives. Well, Black people in position of power. I think that they are just, they're just like the sleeping pill to the general society, because I don't consider us rising as a people by a few individuals rising and everybody else continuing to remain in the same position. Because when we look at other societies, we don't judge how they're progressing based on 2-3 people who've made any progress. We look at them as a country, we look at their GDP, we look at what they're producing, we look at how their country is developing. But only when we talk about Black people, we always like to point out a few. I mean, we talk about the celebrities, and we have 2 Black billionaires in America, and then a few other billionaires in the world, and then we have a few Black executives, and we have a few Black, but that doesn't determine our progress as a people, because there are a few individuals who've made it through that that glass ceiling. So I'm always looking at it communally and as a whole. Are we better off today in 2020 than what we were as a group, as a community in the 1960s? I don't believe so. Because we had in 1920s, I don't know if you heard about Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We had an entire city almost that was Black owned, Black ran. Businesses, schools, whatever you name it, we had it there. That was the definition of us rising as a people. Why did they have to destroy that? Because that was too strong for the white society to swallow. Why did J. Edgar Hoover say in his memo in COINTELPRO that we have to stop the rise of a Black Messiah who may electrify the people? Because they're afraid of the fact that if we rise, just like they say in the Bible, that lest they join on to an enemy of ours and fight us and do back to us what we've been doing to them for centuries on. Well, we're not like that. We're not like that. We're not those kind of people. We're peaceful people. But at a certain point, things have to change, even if they are forced to change. In whichever way possible, like Malcolm X said, and by any means necessary. Whatever is necessary for us to, first of all, preserve our lives, and then secondly, to rise above the position that we've been forced into for centuries on, we'll have to do that. We can start it by talking, but we've been talking for years and years and years, but what's changed? We've been talking ever since. It's time to start doing. Adar, I have to go.
Yeah,
I have to go
that's
now.
fine. I know we reached the time. I mean, we have a lot more to talk about. You know, we need
Let's do it again.
10 more episodes we could do on this. You want to leave it with
a lot of other topics as well.
Yeah. Well, you know, we could touch many topics. Do you want to leave it with like one final note? You said we need to stop talking and start doing. So do you want to let people know what they can do, what the Black community can do, what white people can do, what anybody can do to help?
Okay. As far as the Black community is concerned, we can just take the Hebrew Israelite community in Dimona as a model for being self-sufficient, as a model for taking our own destiny into our own hands and creating for ourselves and bringing and offering to society something. We can't always be the ones who are begging society to give us something. We have to now offer things from society to society. And we have a lot to offer as Black people in every aspect. But we have to just have that kind of trust in ourselves and that kind of faith in ourselves and that kind of confidence to be able to say, okay, this is what we're going to bring to the table, and then bring it to the table. As far as white people is concerned, I would say that the idea of white supremacy should start to decrease from your mind. Just take it away. Things don't make you better because you're white, and they don't make Black people worse or less because they're Black. Everybody in society is a human being, and everybody should be judged based on their own characteristics, based on their moral aspects, based on who they are as people. And then generally, together, we may be able to get to a point where there's a general understanding, because Black people will gain the confidence in knowing that they are worth more than what the world has convinced them that they are. And white people will have to be convinced that they are not all that the world has convinced them that they are. And then we come back to a level ground, and now we're all starting in the same place, with the same opportunities, with the same mentality, and then everybody show what they're capable of. Not Black, not white, not Latino, not Asian. Every person as a human being brings to the table what he's capable of providing, and then as such, everybody will be judged for their own works.
Amen, brother. I very much appreciate the time, and we definitely need to do this again, because as we see, it's a very deep, complex topic, and there's just so much to be done. But bro, I appreciate you. You're doing amazing work, and
Appreciate you.
You know, I'm happy to call you a friend.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me, my brother.
My pleasure, bro. We'll talk soon.